Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Inside Boxing Weekly show is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. If you want to bet on Shabransky and the Crusher this week, I think you're giving 8-1 odds right now, so make sure you check out MyBookie.ag. You can use promo code TGT50 to get 50% on top of anything you deposit to start off, up to $3,000. I'm your host for the Inside Boxing Weekly show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good evening, all. I want to thank all of our listeners who tune in and week out. I appreciate it. Let's talk some boxing, guys.
All right, and of course, my other co-host, if you listen to the show, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Mike, good to be here. Good to be here, Jeremiah. Always ready to talk about some boxing.
All right, we're going to start off by talking with the fights coming up this weekend. Got a few very interesting fights. We're going to start off with Sullivan Barrera and Felix Valera. Valera's main opponent was Dimitri Bivol, who he lost to at a unanimous decision. Barrera, of course, has been on a roll lately, beat Shabransky, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and Joe Smith. His one loss was to Andre Ward. What's your take on this fight starting off, John?
Well, Sullivan Barrera is fighting as good as anybody in the division, and I don't think Valera, is ready to be tangling with Sullivan Barrera right now. The only thing that makes it a little bit interesting is that Valera did go the distance with Bivol, and Bivol's proven he's for real. So I do think you got to give him some credit for that. Valera, he's Dominican. Usually, the Dominican guys, and you look and you see on his record, they're coming up. They just don't have people to fight, and he's got wins. He's got all his early wins are against guys with big losing records. But again, he went the distance with Bivol, so that makes it a little bit interesting. And I wish Sullivan Barrera was in with a little bit better of an opponent, but he's already been in recent years with Shabransky and Joe Smith, as well as Andre Ward. So he's one of those guys that falls into one of those groups for me where you give him a little bit of a pass because of who he's been willing to take on in recent years. So I am looking forward to seeing him despite the mismatch on paper. And we'll just have to see, since he's getting on the other side of 35, if he can look as sharp as he has. Because if he looked as sharp as he has, he's a threat to beat anybody in the division right now with Andre Ward retired.
All right, what's your take, Jeremiah, on Sullivan Barrera?
I think he's good. I mean, I really like his boxer-puncher style. A lot of people should be aware that he trains with Gennady Golovkin up in Big Bear. Every time he shows up in really good shape. That's one thing I can appreciate about him. That's one thing that he has to do at this age. On top of that, I really like his attitude. I mean, if you follow him on social media, he has no quarrel about fighting the best in the division. In fact, he's ready right now. I suspect that if he didn't have to stay busy, if he would be getting one of the. In fact, he feels left out not getting a title shot. He was complaining about Bivol fighting Broadhurst for it, and that I can certainly relate to. But he wants the best, and I imagine that he's going to be getting one of these Eastern Europeans very, very soon, whether it's Beterbiev or Kovalev or Bivol. Is yet to remain seen, but it's going to be a good fight, because this is just a stay busy fight. I mean, I don't know much about Valera, but I can't imagine that they're going to put Sullivan Barrera in a fight where he's going to lose. I mean, you look at the guy's record, the Dominican's record, and it looks like he can punch a little bit. But besides that, I just don't suspect that he's going to hang with Barrera. I'm hoping Barrera puts him away, puts the finishing touches on it, and gets us all clamoring for a fight in the future.
All right, next up we've got Yuriorkis Gamboa against Jason Sosa. Gamboa, of course, looks like he's getting old to me, Jeremiah. His last few fights included a loss to Robinson Castellanos. What's your take on Gamboa and Sosa? I mean, Sosa's a guy that's really tough. Beat Javier Fortuna, Steven Smith, but of course he lost to Vasil Lomachenko. Tough guy. What do you think in this? Now, to me, this is a really interesting fight.
I agree, and I think it's probably the most interesting fight of the night. with Gamboa trying to make a comeback and faltering against Castellanos, who's a tough guy. I mean, he's a workhorse. He'll come at you and he'll throw a lot of punches and try to break you down. And I believe Castellanos also upset, who was it? Ronnie Rios, the Golden Boy prospect, too, and ended up stopping him. So he's not a bad fighter. He's a good fighter. But the fact is, Gamboa would have whipped his butt in his prime. I mean, Gamboa is one of those guys we watched at 126, and he awed a lot of us. I mean, his hand speed was blazing. His power was fantastic. His combination punching was something that you certainly don't see from a lot of Cubans. So he kind of broke the mold in that sense. But he looks over the hill now, and that's not to say that he can't contend in a division. But with Sosa being the way he is, and he's a go-getter, he's tough, he can take a shot. You kind of think to yourself that, and I think this is what the betting odds reflect. I'd have to look at him again, but that Sosa is eventually going to catch up to Gamboa, probably stop him in the late rounds, and then Sosa will probably get a shot at somebody up top. But I'd like to see Gamboa. Again, Gamboa is a guy that I've always liked. It's not necessarily his attitude; it's just his style. So I'd like to see him get back into contention, but I'm just not convinced here. But it is an interesting fight. I think stylistically they mesh well, and I think this could go either way, really.
All right. Do you agree, John?
Well, looking at the MyBookie AG odds, Sosa's a minus 365. So he's a solid favorite, but he's not a huge favorite. I basically agree. I think if I recall, I think we all agree about Gamboa. We all liked him coming up, had the talent, and just a combination of because of inactivity and then because of his style. Gamboa is that guy that he falls into, and I learned this decades ago from reading Emmanuel Stewart interviews, but he was right on with this. You have a guy who's very good in a younger age, and he's all kind of speed and reflexes and powerful just as like a physical force, but not necessarily from the pure boxing skill perspective. And those guys, they lose it at a certain point when they don't have the speed and the reflexes and the youth to just assert their power. They don't have it. To me, Gamboa ended up being one of those guys. So the problem with one of those guys, like you saw Roy Jones at the end and Mike Tyson at the end, there's not really much for them to work with when they don't have the speed and the reflexes, and then they generate their power from that. And they're not a physical force to put any pressure on anymore, just with the way they fight. So I don't know what Gamboa can do. I mean, I think the best he'd be able to do would be if some of the old power was still there. And, Sosa's a guy that we all agree is very tough. He's going to come at you. That's why you like to see him fight. And he comes to fight. And, maybe Gamboa now at an older age being forced to stand there could maybe crank up something with power. But the problem with Gamboa is we haven't seen that. We saw him still able to do that a little bit against Terrence Crawford, but we haven't seen it since. Even when I saw him in with some of the lesser opposition before he lost to Castellanos, he just wasn't punching with the authority anymore. So just don't know what I kind of find this fight interesting as well, but I don't know what Gamboa is going to be able to do to pull it out. So I would agree with Jeremiah. It looks like it's headed for a Sosa late stoppage in this one, and Sosa's an action tough guy who we would like to see against some of these other tough 130-pound guys.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to take Sosa also. Lomachenko is just on another level compared to most guys, so I'm not going to read too much into Sosa being dominated by him because so far pretty much everybody's been dominated by him. The next fight, the main event, we got Sergey Kovalev against Shabransky. Shabransky's lost to the aforementioned Sullivan Barrera, won a close war against Yuaneski Gonzalez. I'll start off with you, John. Do you think Shabransky's got a shot?
Yeah, I've been looking at this one the last couple of weeks closer. Of course, I'm very familiar with both guys, but I started thinking about it a little more and thinking about it a little bit differently. On the MyBookie AG, Kovalev's a minus 1170, Shabransky plus 785, so he is a significant underdog. Now, you hear me on the show talk a lot about you've got to go with the collective wisdom, and I still believe that even with the way I'm thinking, unless you have inside information. I don't have any inside information telling me that Shabransky is going to beat Kovalev, so I shouldn't be picking Shabransky with those odds, but I'm going to pick him anyway because I think that there's some things I've seen in Kovalev that suggest to me that he might be a bit of a front runner. I think you do have to use hindsight sometimes in analysis. You're foolish not to when we've learned more. And I'm looking back now at the Kovalev opponents. You know, even though it was after a little bit more of a layoff, you know, Joe Smith blew away Hopkins. You know, Kovalv-Shabransky stopped Chilemba. You know, Kovalev was huffing and puffing at the end, and it was in Russia. He had a big home site advantage, and he couldn't get rid of Chilemba. You know, guys like Cleverly. You saw Jack just annihilate Cleverly. He lost to Fonfara. That was another Kovalev victim. You know, Jean Pascal's done nothing. You know, those guys kind of were back from an era when the light heavyweights were weaker, and they're strong now. Now, I did think Kovalev beat Ward in the first fight. Ward is a great fighter, so it's not that Kovalev doesn't have talent and power, but I think the reason they're taking this fight is a good reason. Is Shabransky just eats right hands. He got the hell beat out of him by Sullivan Barrera. He showed a lot of heart, and he dropped Barrera, and he kept coming, but he took a horrible beating just because they just can't defend against the right hand. He got rocked early also when he was fighting Paul Parker, and he almost got stopped in the first round, but he showed a lot of heart and came back and he stopped Parker. Showed a lot of heart against Gonzalez. He's bigger than Kovalev, believe it or not. He's 30 years old. He's younger. Two things could go wrong for me with Shabransky. One is he just eats right hands, and that's made to order for a 1-2 right-handed puncher like Kovalev. And the second thing is he's only fought one no-hoper since he got stopped by Barrera. It's possible that beating took a lot out of him. But I'm gonna say that what I think is going to override that is Shabransky really comes to fight. He hits hard. He's a guy that's willing to go to war with you. And even though Kovalev's a big puncher, Kovalev's never beaten a puncher. And I think when Shabransky comes to go to war, I'm not going to say Shabransky couldn't get caught in the first two rounds with the right hand the way he eats right hand and get stopped. But I'm going to guess that he's going to override that in this one with his size. Kovalev might have a little trouble with the delivery compared to somebody who's maybe even a bit technically better than Sullivan Barrera, who was able to do that. I don't think Kovalev can counter the way Barrera does. And I think that Shabransky is going to get on Kovalev, and I think we've seen some signs that Kovalev might wilt when he's really challenged, and he's 34 years old now. So I'm going to go with the huge upset, which is a very dangerous pick with these kind of odds, and I don't have any inside information. But I'm going to go with it. Also, kind of interesting, Shabransky sparred with Canelo when Canelo was getting ready for Chavez, and he's also sparred with Bivol and David Benavides for this fight. I saw Keith Idek tweet about that. He writes for the Bergen Record, New Jersey, and boxing scene. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So if you're a believer in tough sparring, Shabransky should be ready. And Kovalev's also had the trainer problem, so that's the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge there. I don't know. It just seems chaotic to me. So you say he doesn't have any excuses, but then John David Jackson's out. So that doesn't fit with his actions. So I'm gonna go with the upset here.
All right, Jeremiah, you want to go with John in the upset, or are you going with Kovalev?
No, I'm not agreeing with John tonight, but there's always that risk. I mean, we've seen time and time again that things are, as much as they seem set in stone, you never know. I mean, we've certainly seen guys as good as Kovalev be upset by guys on Shabransky's level. So it's not impossible, but I would say it's improbable. John was spot on in his remarks about Shabransky eating right hands. That's what I think is going to be his downfall, because I still rate Kovalev as maybe the best puncher in the sport. I think some steam was kind of taken off of that because of the Ward losses. But for me, you look at his body of work, and I remember he was breaking, he broke Cedric Agnew's rib with a jab. He put who was the Ukrainian? He was an amateur, but he was chinny. Put the guy to sleep with a jab. I mean, Kovalev to me is is still certainly one of the hardest punchers in the sport. And as tough as Shabransky is, I look at I look at Shabransky's fight with Gonzalez, which was great. That was a fight that I enjoyed watching. Then you watch Gonzalez's fight with Bivol. Shabransky taking all those right hands from Barrera. I just don't think Barrera may be technically better. That may be true, and he may be a better counterpuncher. But Kovalev is a very accurate puncher with the right hand. He knows how to set it up. He's got a really good jab. I mean, you look at the first fight with Andre Ward, and Ward, to me, had one of the best jabs in boxing. He's a smart jabber. I mean, it's not consistent. It's not pumping at you like a piston. But Kovalev was tit for tat with him in the jab department. And for me, I just don't think Shabransky's going to be able to work under the jab. I do think he's going to take too many right hands and probably get stopped in the middle rounds. But it is an interesting thing. And with all the stuff surrounding Kovalev and where he's at mentally, it's hard to say. I mean, it seems like for half the training camp, Sergey Kovalev didn't have a trainer. And that's almost unheard of in today's boxing. I don't know anybody who would recommend, working out by yourself, no matter how long you've done it. That is one thing in Kovalev's favor, however. I mean, he has been doing these things for many, many years. I mean, he was an amateur for a long time. He's been a pro for a while. So it's not as if he doesn't know what he's doing. But, Kovalev kind of seems as if he's, he's been kind of I don't want to call him a head case, but mentally he's always kind of seemed like an odd figure. I mean, he certainly brought on some controversy with some of the things that he said in the past. His breakup with John David Jackson is an oddity as well. But for me, I don't think it's going to be his downfall. I think he'll have a little left. How long he'll stay near the top is a tough thing, even if he gets through this fight, because again, the division is hot, and he's going to be dealing with a lot of people who are stylistically similar to him, but younger, and people who, guys like Beterbiev and Bivol, et cetera, guys who don't really know how to lose, or guys like Barrera who know how to lose, but know how to lose in a classy fashion. I mean, it's not, you can rest your hat on losing Andre Ward in the way Barrera did. I mean, it was certainly a learning lesson for him. So I think Kovalev's going to stop him in the middle rounds. I think he'll move on, and I'm looking forward to seeing who Kovalev, fights next.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kovalev too, John, just because I've seen Shabransky. I just don't think he's on Kovalev's level. I understand what you're saying with the Chalaba fight and the two Ward fights and how he wore out. But I don't see the way defensively that Shabransky fights that he can take it into the 8th or 9th round and wear him out.
Well, I think that's a valid point. That is going to be the danger. But Kovalev has never really fought a real big puncher, and Shabransky does have power. He even dropped Barrera in the loss. But I agree. I mean, Shabransky is not defensively responsible, and Kovalev's a big right-hand puncher. I think that's why Kovalev can't flip the fight. I mean, he's with, main events, and of course they do work with HBO. Shabransky's with Golden Boy, which works with HBO, so they're able to put it together. But I'm sure, Kovalev in main events and HBO. Let's face it, HBO has invested much more in Kovalev than they have Shabransky, who's only been on HBO Latino. And I'm not saying that anything's fixed. It's just I agree. I'm the outlier here that. The odds makers and obviously people at HBO and main events see what we all see, where Shabransky just gets hit with right hands and Kovalev's a big right-handed puncher. But I think Shabransky's going to find a way to push forward and get through that here and maybe have some anxious moments early and be able to then kind of start wearing on Kovalev and maybe get him out of there in the later rounds. But we'll see. That's not what the odds makers are predicting, and you can never ignore the way the odds makers see it.
All right. So next up, let's talk a little boxing news. I know that Jeremiah is heartbroken because Tony Bellew and David Haye looks like it's off.
Oh man, I'm heartbroken. I mean, geez, when I heard David Haye was hurt, that pretty much ruined 2017. I know it's a strong year for boxing, but as soon as I found out that David Haye, the heartthrob of the sport, was injured, I was crushed. I mean, I don't know what to do.
I think you canceled their Thanksgiving even at your house, didn't you?
I did. Well, at least on my wife's mother's side, I was just like, I'm not talking to you people. I don't even want to hear it. I mean, they don't know anything about boxing, but any word from it just sets me off. So, no, I don't really give a crap. I mean, the funny thing is nobody seems to be surprised that this happened. David Haye is a good fighter. I think he was well on his way to winning the first fight. But what this creates for me is it creates a little void, and the thing which will happen is Tony Bellew will probably get in a fight against some other British fighter, or he'll get against. I wouldn't be surprised if he fought Joseph Parker, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of people seem to be pushing Tony Bellew into the spotlight when he really hasn't earned it. Yeah, okay, he beat. He had a tough time beating a crippled David Haye. It's just not that impressive for me. And Anthony Joshua doesn't seem like he'd stoop that low, thankfully. But I don't really care. I mean, the fight really wasn't that enticing for me to begin with, even in the first fight. So, I don't care. I mean, maybe they just do David Price or Chisora or Dillian White. I wouldn't be surprised to see Dillian White and Tony Bellew get together. I don't know. Maybe they're on different promotional banners. I don't follow that all the time, but maybe that can happen.
All right, and a little more boxing news. I know that since you love Mayweather-McGregor, John, I bet you can't wait to see Pacquiao and McGregor.
Yeah, I'll take a pass on Pacquiao, McGregor. I thought, again, for the reasons we discussed ad nauseum, I thought that it was good that Mayweather-McGregor was actually happening. But, yeah, I saw a little bit of that pop up this week about, Pacquiao apparently looking for that payday. I don't know why Pacquiao doesn't want to take the payday with Horn in Australia. That's a little bit of a head scratcher for me.
Because Horn hits a lot harder, and I don't think Pacquiao can get out of the way anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he might be thinking. I mean, he is old for the weight class. I'm going to give him that. It's just Horn's not that dangerous to me.
But he can punch.
Again,
Conor McGregor can't punch.
No, I mean, Horn's obviously a better boxing puncher than Conor McGregor, but it's just still that seemed like it would be a big payday for Pacquiao. That wouldn't be all that bad, but he really was the guy that didn't seem to want it. So I guess he's talking McGregor, and it's funny, McGregor keeps popping up on this. I mean, let's face it, McGregor can make more money doing this than he can in the UFC. So Dana White wants to get into boxing, so maybe he's going to keep allowing it. But I don't need Pacquiao and McGregor. So that's one I don't need to see. So let's that one I'll join everybody and hope we don't get that one.
We'll go out with our pitchforks and torches.
Yeah, I mean, if McGregor's going to do this, I mean, that's where I don't. Again, we're talking about kind of ridiculousness at this point, but I'd rather see him fight a younger guy like a Horn just to see, what he's got if he trains for another fight or something like that. But I don't need the Pacquiao thing just because Pacquiao's a name. He's 38 years old. No thanks for me on that. I don't need McGregor, Malignaggi. I don't need McGregor and Pacquiao.
Yeah, but the one thing you do notice is McGregor tends to want to fight guys that are 40 years old and shot.
Yeah, well, he knows how to get a payday just like Mayweather and everybody else. High pay with lower risk is always the way people want to go when they're acting in their self-interest.
Yeah, it's become the boxing business model, hasn't it? Jeez.
All right, guys, real quick, we're going to take a break for about 1 minute and 16 seconds to check out mybookie.ag. When we come back, we're going to have a discussion about the top 10 light heavyweights in boxing history.
Hey, everyone, my name is Alex Golden. I am the host of the Courtroom Podcast, an NBA debate show here at The Grueling Truth. And I'm here with one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money. The Grueling Truth has partnered with mybookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And that's why the Grueling Truth urges you to check out mybookie.ag. In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on mybookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now, and mybookie.ag will give you a 50% bonus on first deposit for up to $3,000 in extra playing money. Just enter promo code TGT50. That's TGT50 to take advantage of this offer. Visit mybookie.ag, courtesy of the Grueling Truth Network, and enjoy winning today. mybookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
All right, guys, we're back on Inside Boxing Weekly. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, sitting here with Jeremiah Preisser and John Einreinhofer. Now, over the last week, we've seen some stuff on social media about the top 10 light heavyweights of all time. Me and Jeremiah have a conversation before about it. So we figured we'd include John, see what he thinks, and then me and Jeremiah will tell you guys what we think. So we'll start off with you, John. I mean, who would be at the top of your list all time at light heavyweight?
I mean, light heavies. The order. I always have the same guys. Out of all your all-time lists, light heavyweight in my mind, kind of the order for me kind of shuffles a lot. There's a lot of cases you can make for different guys, and unlike other divisions, there doesn't seem to be as many definitive opinions. A lot of people are saying Ezzard Charles now. Of course, Ezzard Charles is an older time fighter, and you think of him being heavyweight champion of the world, and I'm aware he fought as a light heavyweight as well, of course. But it's kind of like it's always with Ezzard Charles. You put him one, though, it's kind of somewhat of a speculation because he had so much of his career at heavyweight. If he would have gotten more fights and bigger fights at light heavyweight, what mark would he have made? I don't like to put a guy like that number one. I mean, I think I kind of usually then get back to putting Archie Moore on the top for myself. With the basically accepted as the most knockouts in boxing history. Of course, was also able to compete at the top. On at light heavyweight at the top, even though he got his shot really there at the top when he was older. So I tend to lean towards myself putting Archie Moore number one, and then you have Gene Tunney, who's a guy who again heavyweight champion of the world. You're kind of like Charles speculating more about his greatness at light heavyweight. With coming up from there. And, I always got to put Michael Spinks near the top with what he did at light heavyweight. And then, he was the first sitting light heavyweight champ to pick up the linear heavyweight title. And he did it in a more recent era, within the last 30 years, which is pretty impressive when you think of how big the heavyweights have gotten compared to the old days. You could certainly make an argument that what Spinks did, was even tougher than what the guys had to do in the old days, and and I still count that, so to speak. He had to fight at heavyweight, but he's coming right up from light heavyweight. So it shows you what his greatness was. And then people have Harry Greben discussion. Then you're going farther back, and then when people. You don't have as much film. Of course, people have seen him, and you have the reports, and you can go on that. And he beat Gene Tunney, and being the only guy to beat Gene Tunney says a lot. So when people give him a lot of credit for that, that's perfectly understandable. And then and I always myself, I think lately, I would always have him near the top and make the argument for him. Seems like people aren't doing as much lately, but there's days where I look at Bob Foster too, and I think Bob Foster gets in that discussion for being near the top of what he did with how good of a run he had. Of course, at light heavyweight, he tried to move up to heavyweight, couldn't get by guys like Ali and Frazier, but who's getting by Ali and Frazier? So in a way, Bob Foster probably got discounted a little bit too much for when you look back, and of course we know now how good the 70s heavyweight era was. So, hard to take much away from Bob Foster there, another guy who had a long run at the top of the light heavyweight division, and, one of the greatest punchers of all time, no doubt about that. Michael Spinks, Bob Foster, these guys, and then the knockouts Archie Moore. These are some of the biggest punchers of all time. And then some lists, Harold Johnson pops in there. Matthew Saad Muhammad. So there's a lot of guys that can even pop into a top 10 list. So the names aren't quite always as settled.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't see how Ezzard Charles cannot be number one over Archie Moore. He beat Moore 3 times in 3 years. He beat Jimmy Bivens 3 times. He beat Joey Maxim 4 times. So I have a hard time putting Archie Moore over him since Charles beat him 3 times. Plus, you got to remember with Charles, he enlisted in the Army from the ages of 23 to 25, so you lost a couple of his best years.
Yeah, and that's right. I think the argument for Moore is it's tough because, like you said, Ezzard Charles didn't have as long of a run because Ezzard Charles and Archie Moore both started as middleweight, and they were both middleweights for a while. Archie Moore spent more time at 160 than Ezzard Charles did. In fact, I think Ezzard Charles was rated as a light heavyweight in his second year in that division. So he jumped up pretty quickly. I think the argument that I hear from people who rate Archie Moore the highest is just the fact that he spent so much more time at 175 than Ezzard Charles did. Like you said, it is unfortunate because of World War II, he ended up missing years out of his prime. But again, you got to take that into account, but you still have to honor the work that was already done. But I think that does play a factor. The fact that Ezzard Charles did beat Archie Moore 3 times, and I believe he stopped him in the 8th round in the 3rd and final time. So I think 1 and 2. I think there's a case that can be made for Moore. Personally, I would favor Ezzard Charles just because not only do I think he was the superior fighter to Archie Moore, but I also think that once he got going, when you look at his resume. When he was just starting out, he struggled a little bit when he was a middleweight. He ended up losing to Ken Overland, then he ended up getting a draw with him when they fought at technically light heavyweight. So he ended up losing to Jimmy Bivens, I believe, in the first fight, and I believe he got stopped by Lloyd Marshall in his first fight with him. But as time went on, as Ezzard Charles progressed, he showed superiority over both of those men. So for me, it's one of those things like Ezzard Charles in his prime was unbeatable. Archie Moore was more spotty. Archie Moore actually has a deeper resume than Ezzard Charles. I mean, Archie Moore spent so much time down there that not only did he fight guys who Ezzard Charles fought, but he also extended that out a little further. I'm not sure Ezzard Charles ever fought Harold Johnson and some of the other guys. And I believe the last fight with Joey Maxim for Ezzard Charles was at heavyweight. But regardless, I think there's a case that can be made for 1 and 2 for both of those guys. And personally, I'd favor Archie or Ezzard Charles. That would be my number 1 guy.
Well, how about this? This is another guy that wasn't brought up yet. And this is a guy I would put ahead of Archie Moore, and that's Tommy Lofgren. At light heavyweight, he beat George Carpentier, Mickey Walker, King Levinsky, Mike Mateague, Jimmy Slaterly, Leo Leminsky, Pete Lotso, and then he was the Ring Fighter of the Year in 1929 and 1931. He went to heavyweight, beat Max Baer, Ernie Schaff, Johnny Risco, Tuffy Griffiths, Paulino Escuna. Basically, it was the equivalent of a light heavyweight today, beating the 3 top title challengers for the heavyweight crown. He also went on to beat Jack Sharkey, King Levinsky, all top heavyweights at the time.
Well, and not only that, I believe he holds 1 win over Harry Greb as well. I think that he fought Gene Tunney once. I might be mistaken. I'd have to check my sources on that because it's been a while since I really looked at his resume. But Lofgren, widely considered having one of the best left hands in boxing history. Like I told you when we talked before, Teddy Atlas and Bert Sugar wrote a book, and they had a bunch of lists, and on the list of the best jab ever, they had Tommy Lofgren number 1. And you mentioned this previously. You watch his fight against Jimmy Braddock, and Braddock was a pretty good 175 pounder. Not a great fighter, but Lofgren ate him up. Lofgren was an excellent fighter. In fact, if you watch I believe Lofgren also fought Mickey Walker and defeated him. And there's video footage on that. And Walker just doesn't seem like he can get to it. He looks too short. Loughran's too smart. I definitely think Loughran.
Well, and another one I left out was James J. Braddock, who he dominated over 15 rounds.
Yeah, Braddock had some kind words to say to Loughran too. But from what I know, most historians that I know have Loughran at least in the top 5. Gene Tunney is actually, if you look at the old list, Gene Tunney he was not rated as highly as he is now. I think his status as being undefeated at 175 has really pushed the envelope. But previously, he wasn't rated that highly. You look at the Rings 1975. Every once in a while they'll do compilations, or they'll do lists of the greatest in this division, that division, and this division.
They didn't even have him in the top 10 in 1975.
No, they didn't. And part of that is because as great as Gene Tunney was, and he looked fantastic against George Carpentier, he doesn't have a deep resume. Loughran's resume is significantly deeper. Harry Greb's is certainly deeper. I think that was one thing that kind of played in their minds. But Gene Tunney over the years has become higher and higher rated. I think I know at least one person who actually has him rated number 1. And part of that is predicated on not only him being undefeated, but stylistically, they think that Gene Tunney would beat anybody to have ever competed there.
All right, so how about this one, John? We'll bring up a more recent one. Does Roy Jones crack your top 10?
No, he doesn't crack Roy doesn't crack my top 10 at light heavyweight. That's where you can see Ezzard Charles, of course, was wrongfully denied, but I look at, you got to me, I think there's reason to care about, you got to look at, did a guy become lineal champ in the division? Especially to its credit, in the older eras, we didn't have this chaos. And a lot of times it's not fair. I mean, it's not fair, what happened to Ezzard Charles. I agree with that. But, just because it's not fair, do we make him the number 1 light heavyweight all time?
Well, he beat Archie Moore 3 times, though.
Yeah, but he was never light heavyweight champion of the world.
Okay, but he was still beat Archie Moore 3 times. Archie Moore never beat Ezzard Charles.
Well, I mean, but part of that, part of the reason
why we have titles.
No, that's true. But part of the reason Ezzard Charles never won the heavyweight or the light heavyweight title was because it was frozen in World War II, and Gus Lisenovich. It was frozen during World War II, and once he was back from war, so it was frozen for a number of years. So it was kind of tough to compete, and it was the same with guys like Charlie Burley and Holman Williams at middleweight. They fought in a golden era, but when you had Tony Zale going off to war and Graziano going off to war, and honestly, a lot of the white guys, it was just they had to compete amongst themselves.
But I think, when we're talking about top fighter of all time, can you be the never be the lineal champ of the division, especially in the older eras where, again, to its credit, you didn't have this. You didn't have this chaos.
Yeah, you did. If you go before 1940 or 1950, if you were a black man, you always didn't get a fair chance. I mean, Sam Langford didn't get a shot, at least at the heavyweight.
Well, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. But I'm talking about the chaos as to who the champion was. Obviously, there were African American fighters who were wrongfully denied title shots, and there's no doubt about that. There's no disputing that. But Archie Moore was the recognized light heavyweight champion of the world. Ezzard Charles never was.
Okay, but I just don't see how you can rate a guy ahead of a guy when that guy beat him 3 times.
I mean, I think potentially you could if their resume is that much deeper.
Yeah, but I don't think it is.
It's deeper. It's definitely deeper because he fought longer. But again, if you look at their resumes, Archie Moore's resume is spottier than Ezra Charles was. Sometimes it's just a styles thing. Sometimes guys just have another guy's number. So again, I can buy the argument either way, but one guy I also see rated highly in recent years is not a guy who really competed at the light heavyweight division very much, but is a guy like Sam Langford. And this is kind of the nuance people add into the debate. Sam Langford didn't fight at light heavyweight all that much, but he did fight around 175 quite a bit. So some guys that I know who talk about Sam Langford, they view him as one of the top 3 fighters of all time to do it, and they believe that was his best weight, and they believe, hypothetically, if Sam Langford were to fight Archie Moore, Ezra Charles, he would be the number 1 guy. I don't think you guys put too much emphasis on who beats who, but some guys do.
Well, I think this, when you throw in the Jimmy Bivens and fighters like that he beat, plus I just think from the 3 fights there that Ezra Charles showed that he was a superior fighter. And I know it can be styles, but I've watched them both on film, and maybe it's just the styles, but when you're beating Joey Maxim 4 times, Jimmy Bivens 3 times, and you lose 2 or 3 of your best years to World War II, I just don't see how Archie Moore is up there with him. Well, he's up there with him, but he's just below him.
I think, again, title. I think title reign, when you're talking about one champ in a division, matters.
Well, I'm just saying, even back then when there was only one champion, there was a lot of shady stuff that went on that would keep people from having a shot to fight for it.
No doubt about it, there was. But, I think we still, you got to be careful just, how much you speculate. I think the ideal order, for the sport, boxing has charm and it's chaos, but the ideal order for the sport is you have, your recognized lineal champion for a division, and somebody who can hang on to it for a long period of time. And let's face it, and that is how we generally do historically evaluate most fighters in most divisions when you've got a clear champ. When the champ become the man, the one guy, and hang on to it for a long period of time, and you're usually going to come out somewhere pretty favorably on the top 10 of all time.
All right, so where would you put Michael Spinks, below or above Archie Moore?
And that's what I got to say. Unless I'm really sketching out, I mean, there would be days that I would be looking at guys like, Bob Foster and Michael Spinks, even higher up on the list, and then days I wouldn't. So, I'm going to have to cop out on that. Whether today would I have Michael Spinks ahead of Archie Moore, and Ezra Charles or below. I don't think, as good as Michael Spinks was, and then he did pick up the winter heavyweight title, don't know if he quite had enough fights to be the top guy of all time in the light heavyweight division. Even though that's a great era, of course the early '80s. I would tend to think not. So, talking it out, as great as Michael Spinks was, he probably just did not fight quite enough to be, at the top of a top 10 of all time for me.
Yeah, but you've seen them both fight, and I'm not arguing because I pretty much agree with you here, but do you think that Michael Spinks could beat Archie Moore?
Well, for me, and you, Jeremiah, and I have talked about this before, and I think we do all agree on this, I kind of have 2 types of lists in my mind.
Me too, but that's why I'm asking, because I just said I kind of agree with you, but when I watched the film, I think Michael Spinks would have picked him apart.
Yeah, I mean, in the who, that for me is right. The who beats who, top 10 list of all time. I would doubt, that Archie Moore is going to beat Michael Spinks in an actual fight. If in theory it could happen. No, I don't think I would pick Archie Moore over Michael Spinks if the two were actually to fight. Michael Spinks might come out on top
the light heavyweights, on the who beats who of all time. Because again, in a relatively modern era, within the last 30 years, when heavyweights were getting bigger and bigger, he was able to step up and become the first sitting linear light heavy champ to pick up the heavyweight belt. And that's 2 original 8 titles. Linear, as we know, with what we see nowadays, with the chaos and people not want to take on certain opposition, you step back and think about that for a moment, and that's a pretty awesome accomplishment, in the ring. So he may be able to beat anybody.
Now, Jeremiah, my question here is Bob Foster. Bob Foster, to me, when you look at him, I mean, he kind of is like the Larry Holmes of the light heavyweight division. Only I think Holmes had even better challengers than Foster did. If you look at Foster, probably the best guys he beat were Dick Tiger, Chris Finnegan, Vincent Rondon, Jorge Ajamuda. Where do you sit Foster on your list?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a set list. All this stuff takes a lot of nuance to kind of tease out, and you really have to be familiar with just about all of their opponents to really get a good list. But I think Foster would probably rate, I would say about 7th, 8th, something like that. Again, I'm not quite sure, but it's like you said, his division wasn't particularly stacked, but stylistically, I'm quite fond of him because I'm a tall, lanky guy myself. So when I see guys like Thomas Hearns and Bob Foster, guys who can really crack and throw the 1-2, keep their distance, I have a tendency to favor those kind of guys. So
they
Foster
remind you
for
of
me
yourself, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean Foster. I watch Foster, and I love his style, but. And I'm not too hard on him because he failed at heavyweight. I mean, most light heavyweights were not able to make the jump, but you look at how I think stylistically he's a real tough outing for. Again, he kind of reminds me of Thomas Hearns, where he's his chin isn't great, but he can crack. He knows how to keep his distance. So for me, he's kind of like the Thomas Hearns of 175, where stylistically I think he poses a lot of problems for even the best to ever do it. But in terms of resume, what I care about most, he just doesn't have it. I mean, there are just too many guys at 175 who have superior resumes. So that's kind of the details, right? Foster, his resume is lacking, but stylistically, I think he's very strong. So for me, he'd probably be, 7th through 10, something like that.
Now, what about a guy like Maxie Rosenblum? I mean, I think he knocked out like 19 guys in almost 300 fights. Probably the lightest puncher of anybody that we would even bring up here. But he did beat guys like Braddock, Flowers, Walker, John Henry Lewis, Jimmy Slattery, Ted Kid Lewis, King Levinsky, Lou Nova. Would Maxie make your top 10 list?
Yeah. So this is a guy that I'd really like to delve into and take a long, hard look at his resume, because his nickname was Slapsy. Yeah, he really wasn't cracking guys, and they weren't falling. But the thing about Rosenblum is he fought a ton, and from what I understand, this is what I read from. I'd have to try and find the article because this was years ago when I read it. I heard, just one article, so don't take it at its face value. But this is just what he had issues there, but I heard that he got jobbed a lot. I heard that a lot of his fights, they took the decision from him because stylistically he wasn't appealing. And we all know boxing. I mean, this is time honored. If you're not stylistically appealing, if you're not putting butts in the seats, yeah, you'll get robbed every once in a while. I mean, because for them, it's more beneficial for them to get their prospect of victory. Some hard punching guy who's hard nosed and gets in your grill. It's financially beneficial to keep him going, or other guys who are more popular than a guy like Maxie Rosenblum. I mean, Maxie Rosenblum did have some popularity because he was in the limelight and whatnot, but that's a guy that I have a hard time rating because his record is spotty. But I'd love to see some newspaper clippings from a lot of his fights and see what some ringside observers said, because like I said, from what I read, he got jobbed a lot. And, if potentially he won, most people thought he won a lot of those fights as opposed to losing them, maybe I'd rate him higher. But of course, I'd have to see. It's kind of inconclusive for me, but right now I'd have him probably 9 through 11.
Yeah, and the thing I remember reading about Rosenblum, it was either in an old Ring magazine or Boxing Illustrated back in the 70s, was the fact that he was naturally fit and preferred late nights to actually training. And when they asked him why he didn't train, he said because he never got paid for training. So I kind of concur with that guy. Is there anybody that you'd want to bring up that we've left out, John?
Well, I just think you made a good point about the Bob Foster, with comparing him to Larry Holmes, and I think on that basis you can make a high argument for him if you want to. I understand the argument against him with who did he actually beat at light heavyweight, but when you look at the length of time, he was the light heavyweight champion, and you look at the length of time of his reign, and that really, he really just went so long, at light heavy without being beaten. You could make him, high argument for him, and when Matthew Saad Muhammad was in his prime, you can make an argument for him, slipping into the top 10. I think Rosenblum for me is just a little outside of the top 10. I think you can make the argument for Matthew Saad Muhammad getting in there like at 10. Of course, he gave everything he had, and when he was done, he was pretty much done. But when he was at the top of his game, he was a lineal light heavyweight champion who was going through a tough light heavyweight era. And,
he had he had the most defenses too.
Yeah. And it was a very, very good light heavyweight era. And then, you had a lot of the good guys from that era. Those are other guys that wouldn't crack your top 10, but guys like Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. These guys are in your, they're in your top 50 light heavyweights of all time.
I think a guy like Dwight Braxton could hang with a lot of the guys in the top 10 list.
Right, Dwight Muhammad Cowie, he's another guy that, he's certainly, a guy kind of on the cusp of that, top 20-ish type of thing. Like I agree with Jeremiah, is that, these things are so difficult if you want to do them right, that I don't like to throw out numbers unless I've really done it, and it takes hours and hours and a lot of work to do it. It takes a lot of work to do the current guys, and it's current, never mind going back throughout history and rating every light heavyweight in history and coming up with your real top 10 and putting them in order. So you kind of have to allow that it's a little sketchy unless you're putting that kind of work into it.
All right, Jeremiah, anything you wanted to add?
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I agree with John. I mean, I typically don't have lists. I mean, they're so damn hard to make, but I am pretty confident in some of my ratings. I think Ali is the number one heavyweight ever. I think Charles is number one. I think Harry Greb for me is clearing away the number one middleweight. I think Benny Leonard. I've got guys who I rate up top, but I do want to add, and I wrote an article on this, so I encourage everybody to go and check this out. I do think it's plausible that you could argue Harry Greb is the greatest light heavyweight ever. And, I've noticed lists. I mean, I'm part of the International Boxing Research Organization, and they've got their rankings. And Harry Greb is 13th on their list. And I've noticed, we were in the same forum, right? Remember?
Yeah.
Remember, Mike?
There was a lot of guys that didn't even mention him.
Only two guys mentioned him. It was me and this guy Dave Kalemi, I believe, who had him in the top 10. There might have been a third guy. I didn't follow the forum that long. I just know I had a guy tell me that Harry Greb didn't belong. Anyways, I wrote an article about this, because when you examine Harry Greb's resume at length, and I encourage everybody who likes Harry Greb to go pick up his book. Not the Fearless Heavy Greb, but the longer, more in-depth, more thorough one by Steve Compton. It's a fantastic read. It's a little pricey, but it's scholarly in its approach. Tons of facts. And so after reading that book, I became interested in Harry Greb. I'm like, he was a guy who did not bar you on color. If you were black, white, brown, red, had, whatever. If you were one-eyed, it didn't matter. He beat the crap out of you usually. In fact, he fought 15 Hall of Famers, and he only the only one he did not defeat was Mike O'Dowd, and that was a draw. And he actually tried to get O'Dowd in a return match, but O'Dowd asked for too much money. But I do believe that there's a case, but that you could argue Harry Greb is the number one light heavyweight ever. And, I lay this out again in my article. Harry Greb, I was surprised, this was just kind of on a whim for me, but I checked his resume out in depth, and I had to do a lot of research because, back then a lot of guys didn't have their weights listed. So I would go look at their weights, see if they were within the limit in a certain amount of time, whatever. Harry Greb fought significantly more at light heavyweight than Ezra Charles did. He also beat more Hall of Famers. He beat more champions. I actually omitted one former belt holder, just to make things fair. I wanted to do Lanil champs. He beat more historically ranked opponents. He beat higher ranked opponents. You look at the resume, and Harry Greb's is deeper than Ezra Charles, and he was less spotty against the best opposition than was Archie Moore. I mean, you look at, Gene Tunney was technically 4-1-1 or 3-1-1 against Harry Greb, but if you look at the newspaper accounts, I believe it was the third fight, 19 out of 21 writers polled at ringside had Harry Greb winning that fight, yet they gave the decision to Gene Tunney. You also look at Tommy Loughran, who's almost always in the top 5 for historians. Harry Greb was 4-1-1 against Tommy Loughran, and he arguably won both of the other fights. So he holds the only victory over Gene Tunney, who's generally a top 5 guy. He's clearing away the better guy against Tommy Loughran, and then he fights a slew of other Hall of Famers. And one other thing that I find interesting, and I don't want to make too much about this point, but Ezra Charles, when he was coming up, he fought Ken Overland. Ken Overland is in the Hall of Fame. Well, what they said about Ken Overland was that he was a poor man's Harry Greb, and Ken Overland beat him in the first fight and earned a draw when they fought at light heavyweight in the second fight. So that's one tidbit that I find interesting. Would Ezra Charles struggle with Harry Greb stylistically? I mean, because he's struggling a little bit with a poor man's Harry Greb. Would he do any better against the real thing? I don't know. It's just one thing that I find interesting. And again, I know a lot of people who rate Sam Langford really highly based on his talent, even though he didn't do much work there. And I did want to mention, and this is relevant to the light heavyweight division, but it's not really relevant to all-time greats. But I'm going through Darius Michalczewski's career. And I'm almost there. I'm about finished.
Is he in the top 10?
No. So
I do think he's underrated. I do think he's underrated, though.
I think he's underrated too. I'd have loved to have seen him and Roy Jones fight. Actually,
I would have too.
You know what? Okay,
the light heavyweight clarity we needed, and we never did get it.
And I think Michalczewski would have had a chance.
I think. I agree that Michalczewski should have gotten the fight. I've been watching Michalczewski's fight, and initially he was a bit raw. I mean, he was, he had some slack on his punches, but once he got to the Virgil Hill fight, he turned a corner. He looked really good in that fight. His jab was great. I mean, it was accurate. It was quick. It was stiff. But unfortunately, he kind of reverted to a prototypical European style where he hung behind the high guard, but he was quick. I mean, he did it better than just about anybody that I'd ever seen. But if you were to ask me if he's a top 10, top 20, top 30 light heavyweight of all time, I don't think so. I think he was a Lanil champion, and that was a credit to him. I mean, he beat Virgil Hill, and unfortunately the WBA and IBF decided to strip him for stupid reasons, right? The WBA said, we don't recognize the WBO, so we're, even displaying your title next to the WBO title is blasphemy. We're taking our belt home. And then you had the IBF who were like, oh, you got to defend against William Guthrie in a month. Who gave a crap about William Guthrie? I mean, he beat nobody of note. So they stripped him as well. And then, of course, we all know that Roy Jones eventually fought for those titles. But Michalczewski was a damn good fighter. He was a very good fighter. He wasn't a great fighter. I'm not quite sure he would be a top 10 fighter, a top 10 light heavyweight of the last 25 years, but he was very good, and I enjoy him.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this evening. As always, great conversation. We'll be back live next week with Inside Boxing Weekly. I can also bring up that I believe Monday afternoon at 1 o'clock Eastern, myself and the Grueling Truth boxing historian, Christopher Shelton, will be on. We're going to go ahead and look back at Holmes Cooney, to Pride and the Glory. Also, Sunday night, live, me and Jeremiah will be interviewing Clarence Bones Adams, who was a hell of a fighter a few years back, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I had him beating Paulie Ayala in the first fight.
Yeah, so did I. And, I mean, if I remember right, both of those were pretty good action fights, too.
They were, yeah. I mean, that was when I was really young into my boxing watching, and I was surprised at how good Bones Adams was, because I think he had a few losses going fight, and Ayala looked pretty good. I mean, he was a technically solid southpaw, had a high work rate, wasn't a big puncher, but Bones Adams was able to counter him. He was able to find his distance well. I was really impressed. And not only that, I mean, I think at the time I might have been living in Kentucky, and Bones Adams himself was from Kentucky, so there was some appeal, and it's not often that you see a white guy, especially in the small weight divisions, who's quality. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that interview.
All right, and also we have a Boxing Legends special Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock Eastern, live. I'll be interviewing former heavyweight contender Chuck Wepner. Also, we will have Alex Ramos, who was a bottom of the top 10 middleweight, one of tomorrow's champions on NBC Sports World back in the early 80s. He'll be on Tuesday afternoon, I believe at 2 o'clock Eastern. And we will also keep a lookout within the next week. Tony the Tiger Lopez will be a guest on the Boxing Legends show also. So I want to remind everybody to go to thegruelingtruth.net. Click the mybookie.ag banner, go through, bet on the fight tomorrow night. If you want, you can take John Einreinhofer and maybe throw a couple $100 in there and make a couple grand, right, John?
Well, that's why occasionally you make an upset pick, because that's your chance to make money without putting as much out there, and it's very hard to come up with one. And this is the first one that came up to me for a while that I thought would be might be a good play. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but I think at about 8-1, Shabransky might be worth some money on this one.
Yeah, I think he might be too, just because of what we talked about and the wearing out, and you never know. So I want to remind everybody you can hear all of the Grueling Truth podcasts on the Apple iTunes Store. You can go there and download the app. You can also hear all of our podcasts on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spreaker, Google Music. Pretty much anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find the Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.